We know that when we get people right, we get business right. So I'd like to welcome you back to a revamped podcast with shorter episodes that focus on 3 areas that I specialise in: leadership, performance, and culture. You'll hear my guests talking about their experiences and expertise, and we'll be providing thought-provoking insights around putting the human factor back into business. Each conversation will be accompanied by a free downloadable guide to save the strain on your memory, and resources that will make it easier to put the great ideas we discuss into action. I'm your host, Lisa, psychologist, psychotherapist, and founder of It's Time for Change, and I thrive on conversations that make a difference. So reach out to me. My details are in the show notes along with the resources. So grab a cuppa, sit back, and enjoy. So welcome Megan Carter, who's Head of People at Blenheim Palace and Pye Homes. Thanks for coming, Megan.
You're welcome.
It's really good to have you today because we met very recently at a business B4 ecosystem, people ecosystem. And you talked brilliantly then about building cultures where people belong and perform. And I was like, I've got to get you on my podcast to talk. So we will be hearing a bit more today about Blenheim's award-winning approach to people and culture so that other organisations can learn a bit about what you've done and how you've achieved the success that you've achieved today. So tell us to start with a little bit about what led you to focus so deeply on building a culture where people belong and perform.
So firstly, I was very lucky to join a culture that was already of that nature. So Dom Hare, who's our CEO, has always been a very people-led CEO. I did a talk for B4 when we'd just gone into the pandemic, actually, and about how we reached out to people during that time and how we kept that sense of belonging. But what we did was we didn't have any behaviors at the time, and we based our behaviors and values on how people already are,
Mm.
and how people work together and share a sense of belonging. So if I'm going to be completely honest, it wasn't that hard of a platform to build upon, because of Dom. But at the same time, you still always have teams working in silos and people not aligned. So the first approach was really to get some values in place and to talk about our goals, our people-focused goals, which is the top 100 goal and the apprenticeship goal. So our goals are to be a top 100 employer within 10 years, which we've already achieved, and we're still striving to keep that momentum. And the other one is to employ 100 apprentices over 10 years, which we've pretty much hit that target, albeit a few to finish off and a couple of years to go. So it was about understanding and knowing the business that you're already in to start with, and what drives the mindsets of people, and then really thinking about what needs to change and what needs to evolve as you grow, as your business grows and
Mm.
things get, more complicated, as structures get more complicated, and trying to keep the simple approach and the behaviors kind of aligned, so that I guess we have one truth of, if you come to work for this organization, this should be what you experience. And how people pull together as a team, and how the leadership team act, and how everybody has an accountability for that is really important,
Mm.
because it's not about just the leaders saying this or having this amazing strategic vision. It's about how it filters down the organization. And that can be a challenge in terms of, we've now got performance development plans at every level aligned to the goals and objectives for people, so they all know the vision and they're all linked in some way. And that might sound like a really simple thing to do, but actually it depends on the relationships with your manager, the communication between teams and departments, and just everything you do in between. The one thing I would say is, through the top 100 survey, is really about listening and
Mm.
listening and listening, and then doing something about what you can do about. And if you can't do something about it, you communicate. So it's listening, understanding, communicating, and giving people a voice. Because ultimately, you want to hear from people doing the job. You want to hear how people feel about the organization, why they get come to work for you when they could work for other places. And it's never just about money. And in this day and age, the new generations coming up, they want a workplace that focuses on mental health, well-being, that we're doing good things for the environment. They want a lot more, and so should they, for reasons to why they're going to commit to your organization.
Mm. Yeah, I
Where
mean,
to
you just said
start?
so much. There's so much there to unpick. So you talked a little bit about leadership, and sometimes we talk about human first leadership. So it'd be really interesting to look at kind of what that looks like in practice, because actually what you've just been talking about is really about good human qualities, such as listening and responding to what people say. So if you think about leadership as human work, what does that mean to you? What does leadership as a human, as a human role mean to you, Megan?
For me, because I've always worked in HR for a long, long, long time, it is about that human connection. And having understanding and knowing your people, like who they are, you know, what the children's names are, silly things like that,
Mm.
that again, Don Marcio is very good at. He's got a really good memory. And kind of just having those touch points of, are you okay? How are things going? The other thing in the leadership is, to me, it's not about having the most amazing people strategy on paper. It's about how your leaders then role model those behaviors.
Mm.
And that then becomes the culture. So it's not about what's written down on a piece of paper or your mission statement or your values. It's actually about how you feel when you're in an organization because of how your leaders are acting around you. And are they including you, and are you being asked for your opinion, and how does that kind of sit with everybody,
It's all the little
rather
things,
than,
isn't it? It's all the
yeah.
sort of the eye contact, the time to kind of notice someone and go
Mm,
and say hello,
mm.
and leaders, as you say, connecting that human level, which is not I'm a leader, I'm in charge, I have to know all the answers, and it's actually about being present with other people in that space as a very genuine, authentic human being.
Yeah, and emotional intelligence is not, it's not everybody's skill set.
Hmm.
And you have leaders that are very well within their rights to be in that position, and they need the support to be able to have that empathy, that emotion, and that cannot be underestimated,
Mm.
really, in terms of that needs to be a part of all leadership programs, because it
So,
really does help connect.
so that actually makes me think of another question that I wanted to ask you, which is around how do you support leaders to say the truth with kindness? Because that's
Mm.
something we you mentioned before when we were talking the ecosystem, and it's a really lovely phrase, but again, it's something that not every leader can do in terms of talking about truth with kindness.
Yeah, so it's about creating a psychological safety where feedback is received with the best intention and given with the best intention. So
Mm,
if you feel like you're coming to work and you're in a safe place where you are valued and looked after, then that feedback is much easier to take. But
mm,
it's also about saying, okay, how are we going to improve on this, and what are the next steps, and the follow up?
mm,
So saying the truth with kindness isn't about saying something difficult and then moving on. It's about how then you evolve from that, and how you reach where you want to be, and what that difficult message might be. And a lot of it is about, it's about giving and receiving feedback training. It's about coaching and mentoring people to understand how to have those types of conversations, and just placing an importance and placing a value on that human skill.
yeah,
Um,
I couldn't agree with that
Especially at the
more.
moment
Yeah.
with AI everywhere,
Oh, I know.
and the human element is so important.
Yes.
I would say that, but
But it's also the stuff that is does it doesn't get prioritized enough. So that ability, as you say, to give good feedback and not to be afraid of having those sort of uncomfortable conversations where people have to be brave because it feels uncomfortable to them, it feels uncomfortable to the person
Mm.
hearing feedback, but the truth is necessary, but you can do it in a very kind and caring way. And that's such a skill set. I talk a lot about radical candor. When people understand how to do something, they've been given the time to learn and develop and be supported, and it's okay to get things not quite right until they've mastered it. That's when the real magic happens, because that's all the stuff that we tend not to focus on quite as much.
Yeah, exactly that. But also about may I believe in helping people believe in themselves.
Mm,
So people think because you're a people director that you're just nice to everybody, and that's that's just what you do, is you just go around being nice to people. But I do believe the nicer you are to people, the more honest they can be with you. And actually, it's
mm,
not about being nice to people. It's about just making sure there's an environment where you're giving a lot of praise. So if something does go wrong, something goes wrong, but you're making people feel good about themselves,
yeah,
which is why that nobody comes to work to do a bad job.
exactly,
So people
exactly.
deserve that time and attention, and that's the reason that the PPDs and the check-ins are so important, and
Mm,
for managers to keep delivering that communication and that behavior, because it means a
yeah.
lot. It means a lot to people, even like our employee awards. You know, it means so much to people to receive an award like that, because you
Mm.
want to feel good about the work you're doing.
Yeah, in all that you've just described, you're showing that you care about people, you're showing you respect people, you're showing that you're actively listening, you're seeking out how people are feeling, what their views are, which is coming back full circle to how you started this conversation. So tell us, thinking about that listening, because that's something that you've stressed a lot about the importance of that. Tell us a bit about your approach at Blenheim, which is the you said we did process.
So we have our yearly top 100 survey where we ask the same questions from the survey each year. So what we do is we have focus groups around the results of those surveys. So sometimes they go up, sometimes they go down, sometimes teams, kind of varies a little bit in terms of it might be how someone's feeling that day, literally,
Mm,
or there might be a theme that we need to look at. They're completely anonymous, so it means that we can't see who has said what,
mm,
but what we can do is address specific areas and make sure that we have open conversations around what needs to be improved. So essentially, it doesn't matter what you've said on the survey. What matters is what we follow up with and how we can improve. And that's always you have to be very gentle with managers who have got scores that they're not particularly happy with, because everybody wants really good scores, and that's not
mm,
always possible because there are it's complicated. People are complicated. You
mm,
can't make everyone happy all of the time, but what you
mm,
can do is say, right, I'm hearing that. And the you said we did is you said that you want this, and we have done this. And
mm.
to then communicate that so that from the survey results, they can see that what they've said is being acted upon.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. So the what you just said about managers not liking feedback that's not really positive. I was talking at a conference a couple of years ago around about the barriers that prevent people from engaging with surveys, not the employees, but in terms of a company actually putting them in place, because the leaders and managers are really anxious about the feedback. So it's like, I just don't want to know.
Because they
Um,
care as
yes,
well. Like they
exactly,
want their teams to be happy, and if they're
exactly.
not, it's like, well, this is the first, well, I meet with my team all the time. How is this happening?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's really interesting as well, because actually after we were having the ecosystem conversation and we were talking a lot there about the you said we did, I was reading something that was suggesting a different way of positioning that, because if it's you said we did, it puts the emphasis on we are going to do the stuff that needs to improve so that you benefit. And it was really interesting reading this article which was suggesting that actually rather than you said we did, it should be about you said,
You
and
said you did.
collectively we are going we've done or we're going to do. And it was just a really slight
Mm,
change on that. But I think going back to what you were saying about the accountability, and you've got to have obviously someone driving that, otherwise stuff doesn't happen. But actually to get people involved and having, companies I've worked in where you have working groups that all representative can be representative of people from across the company, that
mm.
can be really, really powerful. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that. It was just made me
Yes.
think,
So when I said you said we did, actually, yeah, you're picking up on a really important point, which is actually a lot of the time it's you said, and actually then they help with the solution. So then
mm,
the managers help with the solution and their teams actually did. So you said we did. There's a lot of teams that came to us last year
mm,
that said, can we do you said we did? Because we put all these things in place already. So it's not HR driven. So it's driven by the company, and that's where you want to be.
yeah,
You want to be, it's an organization wide thing, HR help, but actually it's a company initiative. And that's when teams take ownership of the you said we did.
yeah,
And they come to me, by the way, we've had this feedback, and then we've done it's like it's great, it's amazing. So the tiniest things sometimes that they do that will shift a mindset or make people think, oh, and it's like actually sometimes very innocently, well, I didn't realize they wanted that.
yeah,
So let's just do it or let's do what we
yeah,
can.
exactly. I love that. You talked about your people strategy being framed around three pillars, I think you call them. So grow,
Grow, give and
give, and
belong.
belong. Walk us through those three pillars because I loved how simple they were in terms of helping it change from being something that sounds great on paper to actually this is lived and breathed through Blenheim.
So grow is essentially it's about the person, it's about you. So when you work for us, you can achieve your potential, your talent is nurtured, and your well-being is championed. So growing is very much about you and it's a personal thing. Then giving is about being part of our community. So when you work at Blenheim Pie, you're part of something that's much bigger than that. So we give back to the wider community with our initiatives and we work collaboratively to meet our goals. And then belong is you're part of something special and you matter and you belong. So belonging, we have that's probably my most I kind of favorite saying is with the sense of belonging because we
Mm.
really are when you work here, it does feel like a family. Not everybody likes that terminology, but it feels like you're in something together. And I think that's what keeps people staying. We have a
They,
really low turnover and people don't
yeah,
you tend to leave Blenheim and that helps, I think, the sense of belonging.
they might not like the term family, but they like the feeling of belonging.
Yes, the yes, probably.
Definitely, and I think that really comes across. And I think that there's a really strong thread that runs through Blenheim, which is about genuine care, and that's why you have such low staff turnover and because there is that sense of genuine connection, genuine, we
Mm.
are in it together, we work together, we support each other. So what I'm interested is how you measure or do you measure the success or the impact of those three areas, grow, give, and belong? Is that something that you have got data around, or how do you know it's making a difference?
So the growing is also about personal development. So we do measure how much, especially obviously our apprentices, and that's quite a simple thing to measure, how
Mm,
many, apprentices we've had in the business and the impact of the lives that we've had on them. But also it's about every single training and development course that people
mm,
go on. And obviously the satisfaction surveys, which is the top 100, we measure those. You have to measure. It's a really hard thing to measure and put your finger on it, but you still have you need to measure how much you've put in to the organization in terms of professional qualifications or personal growth. And so I guess that's how we measure. But
mm.
you also it sounds a bit strange, but you measure it by a feeling. Like if people feel good when they go to work, there's a sense, there's an atmosphere, and there's a positive vibe. And
Yeah.
I very much measure it by, yesterday when they're all setting up the light. Honestly, they're setting up Christmas lights. It's going to be fantastic this year. I walk around the palace with a couple of the ops team, and they are so excited and buzzing. And that's a feeling. I couldn't show
Mm,
that to you on a piece of paper.
mm.
You'd have to be there. The same with Halloween or any of the other events, is there's just a pride in what they do.
Yeah. So what are some of the, because I'm just thinking you when you were talking about three pillars, you were mentioning sort of connections with the local community and that kind of thing. So how do you know, because organizations will often think or feel that actually it'll be really good to do nice things that kind of are beyond what they think is the basis of what their work should be. And that sounds for you that grow, give and belong. Some of that people might be thinking, well, that's all very nice, but we're too busy for that.
Mm.
So how would you explain to someone, try and convince someone who's a bit more cynical about actually it's worth doing this extra stuff because it really does make a difference?
it Blenheim and the community just literally couldn't exist without each other.
Mm,
So, you have if you have a thriving palace and, visitors, etc., and, that brings, I guess, people into Woodstock. And it means that, if you're working together, it kind of works. But also we have a community lead who does, you probably should interview her because we do various, work within the community that she could elaborate on more. But also it's about, we do a volunteering day, so we do a free volunteering day for staff each year. And going out and giving back is something that I think is just necessary. And it makes you feel good as well. And if you're doing good things for your organization, then it just kind of all gels together.
yeah, I agree with that. So what are some of the other sort of examples that you might have of how you've shaped or leaders at Blenheim have shaped culture and engagement of the people there?
I think the way the senior management team at Blenheim are very open door policy and very kind of hands-on. So you'll see Heather, who's our, managing director of operations, who is just kind of there on the ground the whole time. We are the kind of people that are we're quite people in terms of the senior
Mm,
management team. So I think the other thing that we do is we reach through our employee forums. So it's not everybody wants to talk to a director of a business or a managing director. You can't imagine being
no,
a 16-year-old and like actually,
no.
so we have to have channels where we are reachable because we understand that as friendly as we think we are, actually we probably look a bit scary to some.
Yeah.
So so that's the important thing is having employee forums where that, you have different representation from across the board and that everybody has that voice and then that we can see that feedback together. So that's another way, but it's just generally a culture, like I say, a vibe of Dom will know every single, he's our CEO, will know every single name of every single person.
Mm,
And that doesn't happen in reality in most companies.
no. No, and I
So
think that's and you've got how many people did you say you've got working?
about 550,
Yeah.
including the seasonals.
So I'm just making that point because there'll be some people listening to this going, well, we've got too many people, so you can't possibly know everyone. It's the strongest strategies
Mm,
are always ones that are kind of lived through day-to-day behavior. And I think what really comes across is that your leaders are modeling very
mm,
clearly who they are and what they want the culture to be, which is about being approachable. I love the idea of employee forums. People won't necessarily have the confidence to speak to me directly, but they're happy to go and speak to someone else who they do relate to, and then we can get the information
mm.
we need. And it's actively looking for barriers, potential barriers to people being able to communicate openly and taking the time to work out how to get around those barriers rather than just accepting that they're there or not even noticing them.
Yes, yeah. And I think as well, and going back to community just very briefly, as we do so much work with colleges and schools as well. So I think just giving that message around our support for personal growth and apprenticeships and the way we value flexibility within our organization, it's not too hierarchical. And
Mm,
I think that's also a way of kind of making change happen. And I think we can change quite quickly because we don't have lots and lots of red tape and
yeah.
bureaucracy, and we try and make our people. Not everyone would agree with this because we have now got a lot of things online because it's much better to be able to see everything in one place so we can do
Mm,
succession planning and things like that. But to have our gardeners and people who are working remotely able to use our technology and actually we are helping them with that is another way of reaching the wider audience because posters great
mm,
but there are other ways of communicating, and we have TV screens and we have touch points when my HR team go and sit in every area of the business every week. They know,
Nice.
they're across that. So that's another thing is, even though it's not HR responsibility as such, it is really important that your HR team gets out there. If that's one piece of advice I could give, is make sure
Mm.
that they go and get to know the people, and we do the quizzes, and you go to the social events and you organize things for that sense of belonging.
I like that because I see too often people in companies just having everyone from HR sits over here and we just stay over here, and people like
Mm,
operate in silos and expect to know about the problems by someone coming along and knocking on the door and telling them.
yeah,
And in reality, that doesn't happen as easily as some people expect it to. So
yeah,
again, that's a really good strategy you've just shared about the fact you've got people across the organization sitting in different areas because you just notice things, even if people don't tell you things, you see them, you experience them yourself.
yeah. And
Yeah,
people just talk to you if you're there.
yeah,
You know, it just do. You just know more about what's going on.
yeah, yeah.
When
I
we
think,
came back from, being, I always talk about COVID because
yeah.
it's such a trying time. But when we came back, people were scared to come back into the office. But actually, now people want to be there because
Mm,
it's lonely working from home. You don't want to work from home. You want to be around people, and that's where you pick up what's going on, and that's where you can
yeah.
help.
And I think also the reason people like to be in is because you're essentially meeting people's emotional needs. Your environment
Mm,
is so intentional in terms of how people behave in it,
mm,
that people's emotional needs feel, belonging is a key emotional need, that sense of connection, that sense of being part of a community.
yeah.
Um, it's actually, I'll put a link in the show notes to an emotional needs audit that I sometimes use with places, because if people don't have their emotional needs met, they feel uncomfortable. They're
Mm,
not going to stay, or they're not going to engage as well or perform as well. So you're
mm,
obviously doing, I mean, everything you've described today is about meeting people's emotional needs. And if we can treat employees as the human first and meet what they need, then the work naturally follows.
yeah. Because if you feel good about yourself and your environment, then you just work harder and
Yeah,
better. It's like
exactly.
it's literally that simple. But I do think we do. People have said to me that when they come to Blenheim, it's they the support that they get. They would rather be at work and in an environment like that. So if people are going through struggles, it's just
Mm,
important to add that it's not always about taking time off, or, it depends on the person, because sometimes you just overwhelm. You need a break. But
mm,
actually, sometimes the environment can be so supportive that people want that structure. And if they keep that going, that can help in terms of any wellness or mental health. So as long as we do lots of things, like we do return to work interviews, and we do mental health wraparounds, in terms of making sure that people have the support, and we work with our wellbeing coach and various other support networks. But the real thing is, when you're speaking with people, is just saying, "Are you okay?" And
mm,
actually, that's quite powerful, because a lot of times you're just talking about maybe work and tasks, and you forget to say, "Are you okay?" And it's funny how when I ask that to people, they always take a minute,
mm.
as if to say, "Oh, I haven't been asked that for a while," and
Yeah. Yeah, am I actually okay?
am
Have I
I
thought about
okay?
it?
Yeah.
And it makes me think of an episode of this podcast. I think it was my last guest, Dr. Claire Plumley. We were talking about burnout, and I was intrigued to know because
Mm.
clearly Blenheim's doing really well. You've achieved significant milestones. How do you make sure that people are performing really well without overextending themselves and kind of potentially then burning out because they care so much, they just want to work, work, work?
That's the difficulty, that the passion can turn into overcommitment and
Mm,
burnout, and the caring can become quite personal. So people want to do so well, and it's about putting the boundaries in, and about spotting it, and
mm,
spotting it early, and making sure that you're kind of, distributing the workload effectively, that, and also you're thanking people enough that they kind of you almost don't mind if you're being appreciated with anything that you do. But if it's being recognized, you can suddenly take a bit of a breather and a bit of a step back because you're not
Yeah.
trying so hard
Yeah.
to show. So I think the main thing is spotting it early, having the regular check-ins and having the culture where yes, we do run towards problems. We
Mm,
do all muck in and we do go over and above. But if someone's struggling, give them a hand and make sure that we're doing that
yeah.
actively.
So we need to wrap up very shortly. Before I ask you a question that I know you've thought about because you've got something lined up to show us, and before I ask you that, I wanted to ask you what you think other leaders can take away from Blenheim's approach. So, what would be your key messages that you think
Yeah.
actually this is what, if you're a leader, these are the things you go away and really focus on because they make all the difference?
Don't be afraid to ask everybody questions. So in terms of surveys, don't be afraid to understand what people are really thinking and feeling, because
Mm,
that's the only way you're really going to get to know your organization. I think make sure you're strong with your role modeling. So by that I mean we all have things that we say or pay lip service to, but make sure you're being seen to do those things.
mm,
And when you do get feedback that's not always good, and through bitter experience, try and take that on board as an opportunity. And we call this opportunities when there's a survey that's come back that's negative or whatever that is. This is an
mm.
opportunity to work on this area. This is an opportunity for this. And if you see it like that and you change your mindset, it's a lot easier to deal with. Otherwise, it can be overwhelming to think, how can I fix all of this?
Yeah.
And bring everyone together to fix it's everybody's thing to fix. Working together in an organization that is good is because you're all working together, and you cannot achieve that goal with one senior leadership team. You can only achieve that goal with everybody.
I'm giving you a round of applause there, Megan, because I think you're absolutely spot on. It is a collective responsibility, and sustainable performance, I think, really comes from a proper connection where everyone wants to be involved and collaborate and feels empowered to do their bit. They have a sense of control. Um, so it's got to be a collective approach, and I think then it takes the pressure off a group of leaders or a group of managers who have to just resolve everything. It's like actually we're going to put this.
Hmm.
This is our challenge. This is what we're trying to change. This is what an opportunity to develop.
Yeah,
What's the best way we should approach that? And when we everyone has a voice in terms of shaping that, A, it's much more meaningful, and B, it takes the pressure off an individual or a group of people to
yeah.
suddenly solve everything.
So empowering others, that's what it's about, because otherwise you'll just get people presenting you with problems after problems after problems,
Mm,
but not helping to
yeah,
come to a solution.
yeah,
So empowering others is
yeah.
good.
So my question that I want to ask you is about what's one truth about leadership you wish more people understood? It's my final question to you.
I wish more people understood about leaders that they are actually more human than you give them the credit for. So a lot of leaders will have, shall I call it a game face, or kind of,
Yeah,
a
yeah,
front,
yeah.
and they're really I genuinely know that most leaders I know have worked very, very, very hard to get to where
Mm,
they've got to.
mm,
And you might not see them walking the floor as much as you want to, or you might have an opinion about them, but actually I can guarantee you there's hours and hours of work that goes in every week, and a career of failing and getting up again, and going through personal struggles. And I wish people would understand that leaders are really so human, and that give if you give your feedback, and then hopefully
yeah,
that will help enable change. And yeah, I guess
yeah.
that's
That's
what I
good.
would
Yeah,
say.
that's really helpful to hear. Thank you so much for joining me today, Megan. It's been super interesting to dive a little bit more into some of those particular areas. There's a really consistent theme of care running and being human running through everything you've said. So it's so good to talk to you. Listeners can find your details and more insights from this conversation in the show notes on my website and on LinkedIn. So thank you very, very much for joining me. And everyone
You're
needs to remember
welcome.
that when people thrive, the business thrives. So I hope people take lessons from what you've said today. So thank you so much, Megan.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks for inviting me.
If you enjoyed listening to this conversation, there are 3 things I invite you to do. First, click the link in the show notes to download the resources for this episode. Secondly, help me extend the reach of this podcast by leaving a quick review on Apple or wherever you listen. And please share this episode with your colleagues so that you can discuss what resonates with your team. And finally, as usual, I invite you to reach out to me on LinkedIn or through my website so that we can keep the conversation flowing. I know listeners often say they're keen to implement some of the key takeaways, but sometimes find it tough without guidance or extra support. If that's you, drop me a line and let's chat. If you're listening to this in autumn 2025, then keep them peeled for my brand spanking new website that's coming soon. Be sure to check it out. It's timeforchange.co.uk to find a whole heap more to support you to reflect on and develop your own practice. And while you're there, join my mailing list to stay up to date with bespoke support services like my new retained partnerships, where I'm by your side through all things leadership, culture, and performance. Feel free to reach out if you want to know more. I'm a great sounding board for challenges and ideas for development, so grab all the details you need from the show notes. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you and to welcoming you to the next episode coming soon. Join me then.